The Tree Singer. My friend Carrie told me this story many years ago. While its details might have imperfections here and there due to its memory fading slightly over time, I can assure you it is completely true. Anne and Carrie lived near one another in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside of Minneapolis. The kind comprised of craftsman houses from the 70s, tree-lined streets, and lots of cul-de-sacs. They were best friends, bosom buddies, and attached at the hip. They were also polar opposites. Anne was the perky blonde cheerleader, and Carrie's mousy morose bookworm. Anne's father worked in a psychiatric prison. He was short and scrawny, his strawberry blonde hair bordered by a receding hairline, but he held a quiet power in his presence. Both girls towed the line when he was around, as he was not to be trifled with. His role was to evaluate prisoners to determine whether or not they were eligible for parole or release, and suffice it to say, he made more than a few enemies over the years. In fact, after an unfortunate encounter with an inmate, he now wore clip-on ties to work in order to avoid the risk of strangulation. It was one of those humid Minnesota summer nights. Anne and Carrie were at Anne's house watching a movie and combating the heat by drinking Diet Coke out of sweating cans. About 30 minutes into their show, the sky darkened rapidly and severely, heralding the arrival of a thunderstorm. Both girls grew nervous, particularly since they were home alone. Anne's mother was out of town on business, and her father was, as usual, working late. The TV in Anne's living room sat in front of a large picture window, giving them a clear view of the ominous sky. In the yard stood a multitude of trees, including a delicate crabapple tree a few feet away from the window. As the wind began to pick up, the dark shapes of the tree began to sway. Carrie's eyes moved from the TV to the crabapple tree. Its movement was mesmerizing. It also seemed to be moving more vigorously than the strength of the wind gusts. Wordlessly, she rose from her spot on the couch and walked over to the window to take a closer look. As she peered out the window, she noticed a dark shape crouching in the branches. "What?" Anne asked, yawning and stretching from her perch on the couch. "It looks like there's something in the tree," Carrie said. "Well, it's probably the neighbor's cat, or maybe a raccoon. All kinds of critters like to hang out in that tree. It looks pretty big for a cat. It might be one of the neighbor kids. There's this one boy who likes to spy on me sometimes. He's a little weird." "I don't know." Anne groaned. "Fine, if it will make you feel better, let's just go take a look." They exited the house through a back door and stepped into the yard. The wind was picking up. The storm would be overhead soon. Anne strode confidently towards the tree, only to stop before getting too close. Though the tree's leaves and branches obscured the figure's specifics, it was unmistakably human. Carrie's heart jumped into her throat. Anne squinted, trying to make out what she was seeing. She yelled to the figure, "Hey, whoever you are, this is private property. You need to leave immediately." But there was no response. At least, they didn't think they had received a response. It was hard to hear at first because the relentless rhythm of the wind swallowed up all other sounds. Carrie felt Anne's arm wrap around hers, the universal signal for being terrified. Whatever was in the tree was humming. It was a deep sound, almost a growl, and certainly not a noise that would emanate from a child's throat. It was tuneless and still unnervingly musical. The air was electric with the power of the approaching storm, and lightning began to burst across the sky. Carrie and Anne ran back into the house, locked themselves inside, and called Anne's father. Anne's father listened to Anne's story with a great deal of attention and sympathy. He asked clarifying questions and inserted, the way that psychiatrists do. He assured them that everything was fine. He would be home in just a few minutes. He just had to check on a patient, and that the girls should double-check all of the locks. They barricaded themselves in Anne's bedroom for the rest of the night. The next morning, when the girls came down to breakfast, they noticed that Anne's father was walking around outside and looking up into the trees. When he came inside, he smiled a little too widely, and there was a forced brightness in his voice. He was also paler than usual. "Listen, girls, I have to go to work, but make sure to call me if you need anything at all." He nervously buttoned his cuffs. "Also, just be safe. Make sure to keep all the doors and windows locked. I'll be home at lunch." "Dad?" Anne's skin tone matched her father's. He laughed and hugged her. "Everything's fine, honey. I'm just making sure you feel comfortable after such a scare last night, which turned out to be nothing. I just want you to feel safe, which you are, totally safe. You know that, right?" Anne shot him a dubious look. "Of course you do. Okay, I'm off to work. Call me if you need anything at all." After the garage door groaned shut and Anne's father had piloted his sedan out of the driveway, Anne informed Carrie that she was not going to be going home that day and would instead stay with her. Carrie eagerly agreed, as both of her parents were also at work. They spent the rest of the day playing video games, reading books, and jumping whenever they heard a noise. Anne's father returned for lunch, but told the girls he would have to work late again, and that they should go over to Carrie's house when Carrie's mother returned home from work. As the sun grew low in the sky, Anne began packing a bag of her belongings. She decided to sneak into her mother's bedroom and borrow a lipstick in case she and Carrie decided to go to the local coffee shop and flirt with the boys. Or rather, she would flirt while Carrie sat there like a statue. After blotting her seashell pink lips and discarding her tissue, she noticed a note in the wastebasket. She was not normally the nosy type, but something about the almost childlike, erratic scrawl of the handwriting compelled her to pick it up. It had a few words on it. "What's up, Doc? Tree singer." Tree singer? Someone who sings in a tree? Or maybe hums. Anne frantically called up her father, who chided her for digging through his bathroom trash. He assured her that it was a note that he had gotten while at work and forgotten about it, and had thrown it away at home when emptying his pockets. Everything was fine, but Anne was not convinced. His voice had taken on its higher pitch, his tell for whenever he was stretching the truth. She was grateful to be spending the night at Carrie's house. Anne ended up spending the next few days at Carrie's house. Her mother returned from her business trip, and her theory, which seemed to hold the most water, was that the figure in the tree had been nothing more than a neighborhood kid playing a trick. Everything was safe and normal again, and soon the tree singer was forgotten. After a few more days, Anne and Carrie began to doubt what they had seen and heard in the tree, and decided that Anne's mother was right. One evening, Carrie's parents had planned a trip to visit her grandmother, and Carrie had successfully argued that her perfect grades, exemplary behavior, and ladylike demeanor should earn her a pass to skip grandmother visits every once in a while. Carrie's mother had been fighting with Carrie's father, and she didn't have another battle left in her. "Fine, you can stay here, but Anne has to stay with you. We will be back in a few hours." The girls were playing a nerdy strategy game on Carrie's floor, a secret that Anne asked to keep between the two of them, when Anne decided she wanted pizza. Carrie wasn't eating much that day, but was the consummate hostess. She picked up her Star Trek Enterprise phone and began to dial. She soon had the distinct feeling that she was being watched. Not just watched, but stared at in such a way that was as if two laser beams were burning the back of her head. She removed the spaceship from her ear and held it in front of her. "What is it?" said Anne, who was behind her, hunched over the game board and puzzling her next move. Carrie returned the Enterprise to port and turned around. She locked eyes with Anne and, without thinking, rubbed the back of her head. Anne seemed to experience the same sensation because her eyes grew wide and she turned around ever so slowly to look behind her. Carrie watched Anne intently, not wanting to move her gaze, while Anne's eyes traveled up the wall to the row of narrow, rectangular windows near the ceiling. Directly behind Carrie's bedroom was a row of spindly pines that the original owners had planted there in a feeble attempt at increased privacy. They hadn't withstood the harsh Minnesota weather extremes and looked worn and weary and a little too thin. Carrie drew a breath without exhaling. Anne let out a whimper, the kind of sound one makes when a scream is choked by the brittle fingers of fear. Someone had, in fact, been watching them, clinging to a tree outside the window. Carrie forced herself to look. She saw small, scrawny arms, beady and unblinking eyes, and a mouth turned down in a terrifying scowl. The face was misshapen, crisscrossed with thick scars. This was not a neighborhood kid. Its eyes bore into her in a visceral way, gutting her insides with its gaze. Every inch of her was frozen. The next thing she felt was sharp pain as Anne's fingernails dug into her arm and dragged her out of the house. They wordlessly began running along the poorly lit, tree-lined streets towards Anne's house. They took a route their feet knew well, jumping the curb here, cutting through a neighbor's yard there, two athletic girls timing their paces to the rhythm of frantic breath. And then they heard another type of breathing, raspy and rapid, running along beside them. Carrie could see the figure darting between the trunks of perfectly spaced trees, following them. The figure was waist-high and surprisingly fast, despite its awkward and uneven gait. But the sound of its breathing would be seared into her memory, bringing her nightmares for many years. It was a deep, wheezing, desperately angry sound. Carrie willed her track-trained feet and lanky arms to move and pump their hardest, until at last they saw the twin lamps that illuminated the end of Anne's driveway. The figure stayed with them until they ran through that critical finish line of the boundary between street and driveway. Carrie said it was as if the figure disappeared into thin air as two hysterical, breathless teenage girls burst through the front door. Anne's parents wrapped their arms around the girls as they struggled to recount what they had just seen. Carrie described the scarred face, and Anne's dad looked as if he might faint. "I'm calling the police," he said. He turned to Anne's mother. "Take the girls into the bedroom and lock the door." She nodded and did as she was asked. Once they were safe in the bedroom, Anne burst into tears, and Carrie began peppering Anne's mother with questions, something she normally does when she's anxious. Who had written the note? Who was the tree singer? Who was this person that was after them? But Anne's mother had no answers. The police searched for several hours, but didn't find anything. They took statements from the girls, they patrolled the neighborhood, and shortly before dawn, the girls fell asleep in Anne's parents' bed. Anne's father let them sleep for a few hours, and then asked them to join him at the breakfast table. He looked as if he hadn't slept at all. The person that was chasing them matched the description of one of his patients. This patient was born with dwarfism, and a combination of birth defects and terrible injuries had left him disfigured. He had been in prison for a long time, and over the years, he managed to organize his anger and rage into a vendetta against Anne's dad. He called himself the Tree Singer, and managed to stalk people and break into places because of his climbing talents. The most baffling part of all of this, and the part that Anne's father could not figure out, is that the Tree Singer never left his cell, which was heavily patrolled. When the girls called Anne's father for the first time, he double and triple checked on the Tree Singer, who was in his cell the entire time and had greeted him menacingly. Even though Anne's father knew that there was no way the Tree Singer had left his cell, He still couldn't explain the note. The handwriting was an exact match. Or the sightings. I was one of the few people who believed Carrie's story. After all, I knew the kind of person she was. Practical and grounded, and never one to be the center of attention. I asked her, if the tree singer was locked in a cell, what was it that she thought she saw? And the truth is, she didn't know. She said that people had their own theories. Maybe someone was playing an elaborate trick on Anne's father. Maybe the tree singer had a twin. Some people got a little more abstract in their ideas. Maybe the tree singer wasn't human after all. Or maybe he was skilled in bilocation, the mystical ability to be in two places at once. No one would ever know. The tree singer never bothered Anne or Carrie again. Unfortunately, their friendship would never recover from the terror of that shared memory. The summer sleepovers stopped, and when school started in the fall, they were strangers who would smile at one another when they passed in the hallway, but nothing more. Ever since Carrie told me this story, I make a habit of checking the trees outside my bedroom windows each night, which is, of course, sage advice for anyone. After all, no one knows who or what the tree singer really is, or where he might appear next.
Thanks for watching, and before you go, here's a special shout out to my patrons who donated $20 or more.
Mortem Guterres, Arvok Levgri, Helen Imsland, Dark Nido Taki,
Kura,
Jesse,
and Simon Leverdier Delisle. Thanks so much, you guys. If you're interested in becoming a patron and helping me to keep YouTube creepy, please feel free to check out the link in the card.